Number 10. The woolly mammoth. What two things are big, loud, hairy, smell like Parmesan cheese, and frequent the New York area? If you said Ray Romano and woolly mammoths, then you're correct. It all comes full circle. Starting off with an easy one for you today, and folks, it's one of my favorites. A creature that's been long extinct. Comedians and primetime family sitcoms. No, I'm just kidding. I'm talking about woolly mammoths, the large animals that once roamed the earth. Since these are so common, I thought it would be very fun to do a tale of the tape. Standing anywhere between 2.7 to 3 meters tall in the red corner, weighing in a full 6 tons, the beast from the east, woolly mammoth! Okay, well, they weren't just found in the east, but they were big and interesting creatures, especially since this is one of the few ancient species that we've ever interacted with. Having thick skin and fur made them difficult to hunt. It would take a few blows. However, if a smaller one was taken, it would make for a lasting meal. Interesting creatures.
Number 9. Glyptodon. Take an armadillo, size that bad boy up, give it a spicy tail, take away its ability to curl up in a ball, and make it stupid looking, and you've got the 10-foot long 1-ton Glyptodon that lived 2 million to 10,000 years ago. Now, it would be easy to mistake this guy with a turtle or a tortoise, but it was in fact a mammal. It also had a soft underbelly that any predator able to flip over this walking Volkswagen Beetle would be able to exploit. These guys were native to South America, and like I said, they actually were around for a long time, living just past the last ice age. It's believed, like with most things, us humans had a not so small part to play in their disappearance from this world. We would hunt them for food and for their shells, which evidence says ancient man used as shelter from snow and rain.
Number 8. Titanoboa. I actually didn't know this one existed either. There's going to be a trend of large and scary animals here. Well, in the northeastern part of Colombia, a true beast lays still in the jungle, just waiting for a prey to dare come across its path. What would a titan boa do if prey came its way? Well, just like its smaller counterpart, it would constrict until you went for a big nap where you would then most likely be swallowed whole. Ugh. Well, at least that's what horror films would want you to think, as recent studies suggest they may have actually only had a diet of fish. If you've ever been on a school field trip to a zoo and got to pet the animals, the boa constrictor is always one of those animals. I don't know why, they always got one on hand, just in their pocket. It's weird. Wouldn't fit, but which I don't know why, because if you've ever felt the power of those muscles, well, it would be a very memorable field trip. Just try and imagine that upscaled by 10. I'm glad this one went extinct a long time ago. That's too big of a snake. Too much power. Too much.
Number 7. The Mayans. It's 2021, which means the world thankfully didn't end in 2012. But that movie was good. Kind of, not really. But the Mayan calendar did predict that on December 21st, 2012, this would be the end of us. No meteors hit and Thanos didn't snap away any of us, but that date did mark the end of their 5,125 year-long count calendar. Yeah, and you thought you were a planner. These guys were crazy. One of the earliest uses of the number 0 being in mathematics came from the Mayans. They were super advanced for their time, and they were also quite artistic. They drew complex hieroglyphs on long strips of paper made from fig tree bark. I can't write 4 sentences down on paper without my wrist hurting. I have to like slap it around for a minute. These guys are on a whole new level. These stories date all the way back to the late pre-classic period, so around 300 BCE. That is so old. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica figured out how to consume chocolate, sure, but like the art that we see etched into the stone walls around them, the Mayans made it beautiful. The Mayans would mix chocolate with water and chili peppers and honey. They would make it as a spicy drink. I'm gonna stick with the old pumpkin spice for now. I think that's the riskiest I'll go. Thanks so much though. Debit.
At number 6, Mehergar. Even though Mehergar was a pretty impressive civilization, no one really knows about it because very little interest was invested in learning more about it. Mehergar was one of the oldest civilizations in the world, situated in what is now modern-day Pakistan. Excavations of the site started back in the 1970s, but due to the government's lack of interest, looting, and land erosion, it made it hard to learn much about this ancient settlement. From evidence that has been gathered, we do know that Mehergar had a population of around 25,000 people, and based on some of the remains recovered from this ancient civilization, there was evidence of dental surgery, which, as you can imagine, isn't really something you see very often, especially at the time that this civilization existed. Other than that, many of the other secrets of the civilization are buried very deep in the earth, so it makes it much harder for researchers to uncover them. What has been found though are some pretty well preserved buildings made from brick, and even a formal cemetery. Who knows what else we might learn from this site.
Number 5. Rapa Nui. Also referred to as the Easter Islanders, the Rapa Nui is known most famously for their Easter Island heads, the Moai. that still to this day reach up to 13 feet tall and weigh over 80 tons. Massive achievements. Now, how did they build these things, and also how do they move them around? Well, there's of course a crazy alien theory, and it's my favorite theory of all. The indigenous Rapa Nui claim that these statues once roamed the land, like Night at the Museum, but with, less bubblegum and fun. There were once thousands of these sculptures, but during the 1700s, civil wars resulted in the Rapa Nui tearing them all apart. It was already an impressive feat building them away, but in 1914, archaeologists discovered they also had bodies beneath them. Just like us YouTubers, you never know underneath here. We could be 7 feet tall, or we could be 5 feet tall. You really don't know. Look at this. You have no idea. The theory that all these statues would move around seems a little bit more plausible now that we know that.
At number 4, Nubia. The ancient civilization of Nubia was almost like ancient Egypt adjacent until it wasn't. Nubia was located south of Egypt in Sudan, and at one point they even ruled Egypt. Nubia even had their own pyramids, and over 200 of them still remain today. The period that the Nubians ruled over Egypt was known as Egypt's 25th dynasty, or the Black Dynasty, because of the dark skin of the Nubian pharaohs, and this time was known for its stability and prosperity, with a lot of their emphasis being on arts and culture of the people. This civilization had their own written language and rich culture, and they were also very wealthy as they were situated on a literal gold mine. They continued to thrive until an Egyptian pharaoh raided Nubia and turned it into a mineral extraction outpost. Rather than Nubia rule over Egypt, the tables turned and the roles were reversed, making Nubia an underling of Egypt. Eventually, the Nubian people just assimilated into the Egyptian population, and Nubia just died off over time.
Number 3. Terror bird. Such a fitting name. This carnivorous bird became the top predator in South America after the dinosaurs went bye-bye. This bird had about 25 different species, ranging from 1 to 3 meters or 10 feet in height. That's a big bird! Some species could have been scavengers, but others, they were definitely apex predators. Some had big, strong, stout legs that were probably good for kicking prey or even crushing bones, with big curved claws or talons for stabby behavior. They had big skulls with bones that were fused together, unlike a lot of birds, which was probably useful for pecking things into the afterlife with their massive sharp beaks that were also likely useful for getting big, nasty, fleshy bites. Their closest living relatives in South America today take out their prey by picking it up and slamming it into the ground over and over and over and over again. So imagine that, but from a giant 10-foot angry ostrich with a giant beak. So yeah, terror bird. It's a good name.
Number 2, giant beaver. Yeah, my Aunt Flo used to have a bear-sized beaver. Too bad it ran away. Okay, all jokes aside, giant beavers, also known as castoroids. That's a strange name. First discovered in the very busy and important state of Ohio back in 1837, these fossils pop up anywhere from Toronto all the way down to Florida. Getting as large as 7 feet long and just shy of 300 pounds. This is a beaver whose dam you don't want to break. Despite how awesome the giant beavers were, they are now extinct, and despite the Hudson Bay companies or the dismay of French-Canadian fur trappers, the beaver went extinct thousands of years ago. Today we are unsure what made them go extinct. Some suggest hunting, but we're not even sure if they existed along early humans. All I know is that a tail on that bad boy would be very dangerous. Seriously, people think the beavers are dangerous, but you gotta be careful around them. And I salute the beaver, as it is Canada's national animal after all.
Number 1. Andrewsarchus. And here we are, Andrew's ancient relative, the Andrewsarchus. The name Andrewsarchus was given as a dedication to Roy Chapman Andrews, who I share a last name with, so maybe I'm related too. Who can say? Andrews, such a unique name, isn't it? Which is fitting, because this bad boy right here was unique. Its massive 3-foot skull was very similar to a wolf's skull, but its jaw and tooth structure made it more like a mesonychid, which are related to horses and deers, but also relatives to whales and hippos. It was a giant, hoofed carnivore, like a mix between a pig and a wolf, but massive. It probably ate literally anything it could get its jaws around. It could have been anything from tinier mammals to plants and roots to giant herbivores related to rhinos. If I ran into a huge, hoofed pig wolf capable of taking down rhinos, I'd just lay down and give up. Luckily, it lived 45 to 35 million years ago in Asia, specifically the area around and near modern-day Mongolia. And Andrewsarchus did not adapt well to the changing times and didn't last as long as other ancient creatures on this list. Just like Andrew, we're still trying to figure out exactly what kind of animal Andrewsarchus was.
At number 10, Paranthropus robustus. Let's kick things off with the genus of hominin that we didn't get to discuss in our last video. The genus Paranthropus was a group of now extinct hominins known for their robust skulls and distinct jaw shapes. Paranthropus robustus was one of 3 species within this genus and lived between 1.6 and 1.2 million years ago in southern Africa. These hominins were quite short compared to later humans, standing at an average height of 3'9" for males and 3'3" for females, so these guys were pretty short. This species was known for their chewing. Yeah, weird flex, I know, but the standards for excellence were pretty low 1.6 million years ago. Their teeth and jaws were specifically designed for eating tough fibrous foods, and their jaw muscles were very large and strong to make all that happen, hence the name robustus. Other than their impressive eating abilities, not much else has been discovered about this species. No stone tools have been associated with Paranthropus robustus, however it is believed that they did use bones as tools to dig in termite mounds for snack time. At number 9, Paranthropus boise. Up next we have another species of Paranthropus, Paranthropus boise. This early hominin came before Paranthropus robustus and lived in eastern Africa between 2.3 and 1.2 million years ago. Much like other classifications of Paranthropus, this species also had a specialized skull for intense chewing. They had very large faces because of their large jaws and temporalis muscles, which are the muscles that you use for chewing. What Paranthropus boise had that other members of his genus didn't was thick dental enamel. In fact, Boise had the thickest dental enamel of any early human. They also had larger teeth than Paranthropus robustus, and these guys basically just lived to eat. It was their only real skill. Other than their eating habits, we know that Paranthropus boise also lived mostly in grasslands. Now before we carry on talking about our extinct ancestors and talking about their ancient lineage, I would first like to take a moment to ask you guys to consider subscribing to the channel. We've got so many awesome videos for you guys to enjoy and learn from, so come join the Bumblebee family. Moving on to the third species in the Paranthropus genus, we have Paranthropus aethiopicus. Because very few fossils of this species have been discovered, scientists don't really know much about Paranthropus aethiopicus. But we do know that they lived between 2.7 and 2.3 million years ago in eastern Africa. Like the rest of his Paranthropus pals, he was built to eat. The shape and size of this species' teeth suggest that they lived on a mostly vegetarian diet. Since we don't really know much else about this species, I'll instead tell you about what happened to the Paranthropus genus. Well, obviously they all went extinct, but funnily enough, they died off as a result of the very thing that they were designed for. This genus was designed to eat, but eventually they hit an evolutionary dead end and they all just sort of died off because they were too specialized and couldn't adapt to the new food sources being produced by Africa's changing climate. Paranthropus also shows no direct connection to the family tree that produced Homo sapiens, so when you look at things, Paranthropus kind of just existed on this earth for a hot minute and pretty much accomplished nothing. That's pretty depressing.
Number 7, Basilosaurus. When I hear the word basil, I think of a lovely smelling herb. Or I think of old Basil, a kind old man, probably with white hair and a big bald spot and a mustache. Now, thanks to this video, I will think of a 65-foot long sea monster with a 3-foot head and a bite force as strong as a T-Rex. Whales have been around for a heck of a long time, and they have had many different ancestors and cousins. All of them were different levels of odd and terrifying. Basil here was one of the earliest identified ones. It was fairly different from its modern descendants, as you can tell from these pictures. It had a longer eel-like body with that tiny head. It only weighed about 10 tons, which is odd for a whale. Being the ancestor of whales, Basilosaurus is a marine mammal, but for a long time it was actually mistaken for a marine reptile, like the mosasaur, being given the nickname king lizard, which is doubly odd because it wasn't even the biggest whale species. That would be the leviathan killer whale. I think I remember why I'm terrified of the sea, yeah.
Number 6, saber-toothed tiger. What's scarier than a full-grown tiger? How about a fully grown tiger with teeth the size of Bowie knives? Wow. Sometimes nature is scary and makes me question reality. The saber-toothed tigers are one of those things. A saber-toothed tiger's diet consisted of large animals, so watch out woolly mammoth and maybe Ray Romano. Obviously most recognized for the protruding large canine teeth that sit outside the mouth even when closed, making for great puncture weapons, as if the large cats needed any more help hunting their prey. Coming into being around the same size as a large Siberian tiger, this is one hefty kitty, and one you wouldn't want to mess with. Fortunately for me and the club of extremely cute gentlemen who cannot run very fast, I do not have to worry about outrunning the speedy, beefy predator. Their extinction is connected to both climate change and a lack of food.
Number 5. The giant sloth. If all of your information about prehistoric giant ground sloths was gathered from watching the animated Ice Age movies, buckle up. For starters, some of these guys were as big as elephants and one of the biggest land mammals. Other versions were as big as oxen or bears. So these suckers were pretty beefy, which I'm sure Sid the Sloth would be happy to hear. They also mostly walked on all fours, although they probably did stand on their hind legs to reach the top of trees and possibly as a defensive tactic. Ice Age was somewhat correct about how they were a little odd. For example, they probably did actually waddle thanks to their giant feet. They also oddly had teeth on the sides of their mouths used for crushing plants. The giant ground sloths are unsurprisingly related to our modern day sloths, but also to anteaters and armadillos. They were mainly South American mammals, but had different versions all over the Americas from 35 million to 11,000 years ago, until around the time of the Ice Age.
Number 4. Gigantopithecus. Put your hands together if you wanna clap as I take you through this monkey rap. DK. Donkey Kong. You know what I'm saying? Great game. Although I never understood why his name is Donkey Kong. I digress. Why am I bringing up one of Nintendo's beloved mascots? Well, that's because I'm talking giant ape, baby. That's right. Gigantopithecus was a large ape that lived in Southeast Asia, some parts of China, and Vietnam. Coming in at a whopping 660 pounds, DK here would need to eat a lot of plants, which, judging by teeth and molars and other great apes, suggests he was a herbivore. At least I hope. I'm just gonna keep calling him DK because otherwise I'll be here all day with my dyslexia, but DK is most closely related to orangutans. However, 100,000 years ago, after some severe climate changes and food shortages, DK was no more, and it was game over.
At number 3, Australopithecus sediba. The discovery of Australopithecus sediba fossils in the Malpa Cave are one of the most complete early human fossil sets that have been found, and they give a lot of insight into the moment where the genus Homo evolved. This species lived between 1.97 and 1.98 million years ago, and some scientists believe that they are the bridging point between Australopithecus and Homo. Based on the size and shape of Australopithecus sediba's teeth, chest, pelvic bones, skull, and legs, scientists have been able to pinpoint where certain Homo characteristics came from and when these features appeared. Evidence found in the remains of Australopithecus sediba also show that this species adapted to a different way of upright walking. Normally, we would see humans walking with their feet pointed straight out, but based on this species' remains, Australopithecus sediba walked with their feet pointing inwards, with their weight put on the outer parts of their feet, showing that humans evolved on more than one path of walking. At number 2, Ardipithecus cadaba. Ardipithecus cadaba was a species of early human who resembled very closely to a chimpanzee but was also bipedal. This species lived in Western Africa between 5.8 and 5.2 million years ago. Not much is known about Ardipithecus cadaba because this species is only known in the fossil record. However, these scientists are so good that they were able to determine this species' bipedality based on a toe bone alone, because they could see that this species was able to push off their toes as if they were walking like you or I. One of the only other things that we know about Ardipithecus cadaba is that they had teeth that were similar to that of chimpanzees, but they were more narrow, which suggests that they were designed to eat fibrous foods. At number 1, the Denisovans. Now, this species is probably the most mysterious of them all because we know that they once existed, but there's not enough evidence and fossil data to actually give them a scientific name. Most of what we know about them comes from DNA evidence. The Denisovans were a species or subspecies of archaic human who once lived in Asia. This species is what some researchers call morphospecies, which are, quote, a group of biological organisms whose members differ from all other groups in some aspect of their form and structure. Basically, these quote-unquote humans looked nothing like us nor any of our ancient human ancestors. All we know about the Denisovans is that they are different. This species was discovered in a lab when scientists pulled 50,000-year-old DNA out of a finger bone of a fossil that was discovered in a cave in Siberia. Given their age and the location that the remains were found, researchers assumed that their DNA would match those of Neanderthals. However, their findings revealed that this DNA belonged to a group of humans who last shared an ancestor with Neanderthals approximately 765,000 years ago. Other than this information, not much else is known about this population. If more fossils are discovered, then they may be granted the scientific name of Homo denisova, but until then, they remain a mystery to the scientific community.
Number 10. Except they did! Phoboromus pattersoni was a breed of very large rodent, and this is thought to be the largest of its kind to ever exist. It lived around 8 million years ago, and though it looks like a large rat, it's actually the extinct cousin of the household guinea pig. You know, the little furry guys that are afraid of everything? Yeah, they used to be this big. So picture a massive guinea pig with a long tail and ever-growing teeth. It could grow up to 9 feet long and be as tall as 4.2 feet, according to a near-complete fossil found in May 2000. It was also semi-aquatic, like a capybara, love a capybara, but its size might have made it look like a buffalo grazing in the water, from a distance anyway. The biggest question that surrounds them isn't just why they went extinct, surprisingly, but why today's rodents are so small if they are related to this beast. Only time will tell, or perhaps it won't. It'll be a mystery forever. Number 9, Haast's eagle. Get ready to meet the head honcho, the top predator in prehistoric fauna New Zealand, Haast's eagle. It had claws as big as a modern day tiger, a 3-meter wingspan, weighed 17.8 kilograms, and this creature was the closest thing to a mythical griffin. It was huge. Its main source of prey was the moa, which was a 3.6 meter high flightless bird. It would dive down from high treetops and crush its skull. It would crush its skull in its grip. Like, oof, like a walnut. That's how powerful it was. Its formidable size allowed the species to survive multiple glacial periods, but it wouldn't be on this list if it was still around. This species is also the most recent on this list, as it only went extinct around 500 to 600 years ago. There are cave drawings centuries old drawn by the Maori that suggest it might have been hunted by the Maori, as it was most likely a threat to some of the offspring in the families. Coincidentally, Haast's eagle also went extinct around the same time its food source, the moa, disappeared as well. Number 8, Arthropleura. 2 words, giant millipede. There, now you know. If this is already too much for you, rest assured it no longer exists, otherwise it wouldn't be on this list. But let's talk about it so we can be a little more grateful for the ones we can squish beneath our Converse. Arthropleura, meaning jointed ribs, was a genus of millipede that roamed during the Carboniferous period. This creepy crawly measured up to 3 meters long, which is about 9 feet long, making it the largest invertebrate of all time. But thank goodness it was a herbivore, meaning it only ate plants. Doesn't really stop it from being terrifying. If you scream and squirm seeing a millipede the size of a crayon, you'd still want to burn your house down. So imagine seeing this thing. Maybe you could treat it like a dog.
At number 5, Aurorantugenensis. Aurorantugenensis is one of the oldest early humans in our lineage. Auroran lived between 6.2 and 5.8 million years ago and was first discovered in 2001, giving him the nickname the Millennial Man. So far, 13 fossils have been found from 5 different specimens of Aurorantugenensis, and so far what we know about this species is that they had teeth that were similar to modern humans, but more importantly that evidence from their upper femur suggests that they were bipedal, given the evidence of bone buildup found on other bipeds. This species was also able to climb trees, but this discovery was very exciting for scientists because this evidence showed that early humans started their journey of bipedalism so long ago. Because this species is at the base of the human family tree, it had more ape-like qualities than anything else, other than the fact that it was probably bipedal. So far, Aurorantugenensis is the only species in the Auroran genus. At number 4, Kenyanthropus platyops. Not much is known about this next species, but we do know that they had an early human companion back in the day, and that companion was Lucy, aka Australopithecus afarensis. Kenyanthropus platyops was a flat-faced, small-brained bipedal species that lived in eastern Africa about 3.5 million years ago during the time of Australopithecus afarensis. Kenyanthropus could represent a closer branch to modern humans on our evolutionary tree, but so far there isn't enough evidence to fully support that hypothesis. Was first discovered in the late 90s in, you guessed it, Kenya. And when the remains were discovered, scientists saw that this early human's fossils featured characteristics that were previously unseen with any other human fossils. Though comparing the remains of Kenyanthropus and Australopithecus afarensis, scientists noted that these two species had very different diets and therefore probably didn't have to fight for the same food source. So far, scientists don't exactly know how to place Kenyanthropus in our early human family tree because there isn't enough evidence, but some people believe that this species could be closely related to the Homo genus.
Number 3, Megalania. Okay, I actually find Komodo dragons pretty terrifying. They're cool, but terrifying, and they exist in the modern day. They are massive, venomous, and cunning creatures, and if that's what we have today, imagine what a Megalania is. The Megalania is the ancient Australian relative of the Komodo dragon, though its closest living relative is the lace monitor. This creature was one of, if not the largest venomous vertebrate to ever live on planet Earth. Weighing 1,370 pounds and measuring out to 7 meters, this gigantic apex predator roamed over 50,000 years ago. Good thing I'm not that old. They got to have the pick of the prey, presumably feeding on marsupials, other reptiles, eggs, chicks, whatever they felt like. Early Aboriginal settlers in Australia may have even encountered them. Whether they were predator or prey, we may never know. Number 2, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I've actually never talked about T-Rex on MA or here yet, so here we are. Jurassic Park is one of the most iconic Spielberg movies because it brought to life creatures of such size and magnitude we could only imagine. The T-Rex sounds terrifying, but when Steven brought this colossal monster to the big screen, I wasn't the only one shaking in my boots. Why? Because of this scene. No! I'm so glad these don't exist anymore. Imagine if they did. The only thing tiny about these things were their arms. But their 6-inch long teeth and 4-foot jaw? No thank you. Despite its sharp teeth, it did not chew its food, it would often just swallow chunks whole. It even had a throat that absorbed the shock from struggling prey, like it was designed to do that. Reaching 40 feet long and 12 feet high, I'm very, very happy that they lived 90 million years before any of us were born. And last but not least, the Spinosaurus. See, promised. I love this name because it accurately describes what feature stood out the most on this massive dino. It may not surprise you to learn that the Spinosaurus had a rather spectacularly shaped spine. It had a large sail-like spine that was probably used to signify the species or used to store water. Researchers still aren't quite sure, but as to its size, this creature had a skull 6 feet long, all the better to eat you with. The Spinosaurus was longer and heavier than the T-Rex, therefore it wore the crown as the largest carnivorous dinosaur. And here we thought the T-Rex was the king of the jungle. Weighing in anywhere from 13 to 22 tons, its crocodile-shaped skull and sharp dagger-like teeth, they ate anything from fish to other dinosaurs, meaning they'd have no problem devouring you. Thank the asteroid, they are no longer with us. It is pretty sad that any of these species went extinct at all. After all, they were just like us and did everything they could to survive. Though at the same time, for the sake of our nightmares, I'm pretty content that they live on in history books and not in my backyard.
Coming in at number 10, Nineveh. The Nineveh civilization was one of the oldest and most impressive civilizations of the ancient world. Located in what is now modern-day Mosul in Iraq, this civilization thrived mostly under the rule of King Sennacherib from 704 BC to 681 BC. Under his leadership, Nineveh was made the capital of the Assyrian Empire. Their kingdom was massive and had a lot of impressive infrastructure like a 15-gate wall around the city, as well as parks, aqueducts, canals, and an 80-room palace. This place was so extravagant that some scholars today believe that the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon were actually located in Nineveh and were commissioned by King Sennacherib. Other than their infrastructure, their culture was also incredibly impressive as well. Nineveh was known as a center for the development of arts, sciences, and architecture, and scribes and scholars from elsewhere would flock to Nineveh to further their studies. They had a library that contained over 30,000 inscribed clay tablets, and one of those tablets included a story of a great flood that drowned the world except for one man who survived by building a boat and searching for dry land. Does that story sound familiar? It might, since it's an early version of the story of Noah's Ark. This version of the story though was inscribed 1,000 years before it ever reached Hebrew text. Now, even though this was a large and powerful civilization, all good things must come to an end, and they met their end after a royal feud led to the breakup, and this led to the joint forces of Persians, Babylonians, and others in the area to burning Nineveh to the ground.
Number 9. the Mesopotamian civilization. Next up we have the first civilization ever recorded in history. Their origins date back to as early as 500 BC in what's now Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Mesopotamia is a staple in history. It's actually the first society that developed agriculture, and its name translates to between rivers or land between rivers. It was a perfect spot to domesticate animals for farming and for food. The oldest wheel ever was found in southern Mesopotamian city of Ur. They invented the wheel, cursive writing, and something even more important than all, they invented beer. The oldest recipe for beer comes from Mesopotamia. Wheels, poems, beer, this sounds like the world's oldest, and dare I say it, best party. Of course, aliens also come into play too when looking back at Mesopotamian culture. They had an advanced understanding of the cosmos using astronomical instruments. Now, one of these instruments was this Venus tablet of Ammisadaka, which could predict these astronomical events. Maybe our earliest civilization made contact and now they're just trying to reach out. Can you get ghosted over a tablet? Probably.
At number 8, Vinca. We're throwing it all the way back to the Neolithic period because we're talking about the Vinca civilization. Vinca is known as the oldest Neolithic civilization in Europe. These guys were establishing their own civilization in the Stone Age long before civilizations like Egypt and Mesopotamia. Though we don't know all that much about them, we do know that they had one of the earliest writing systems in the world. Researchers have discovered around 700 characters that are believed to have been their way of forming written sentences, though this is all just a theory for now since these characters have yet to be translated. The archaeological evidence that has been found from the Vinca civilization suggests that this group of people thrived in the area along the banks of the Danube River for more than 1,000 years before being abandoned. No one really knows why the Vinca civilization abandoned the area or where they went, but maybe one day we will get those answers.
Number 7, the mega piranha. Check out this video.
At those teeth. I'm being extremely careful here. They just have such powerful jaws. I mean, that would take a serious sized lump out of you.
So imagine that, but bigger, like the size of your boogie board bigger. Bigger fish, bigger teeth, and I'm personally glad they are the size they are now. I know B movies have definitely capitalized on the tiny but mighty horror of these carnivorous fish, but head to South America, there you will find the real horror that existed back in the Miocene period. They found a partially toothed permaxilla, which is like the only part, like the upper part of its jaw, but from the size of it, it's presumed that this genus of piranha may have been over a meter long. So if that thing can take this big of a chunk out of you, imagine whole leg gone. Number 6, the Simlodon. Lions, tigers, saber-toothed super cats, oh my. The Simlodon was a massive saber-toothed cat that lived in the Pleistocene era and roamed within North and South America. The size of the cat itself is comparable to the size of lions and tigers we know today, but its fangs are the stuff of nightmares. They had 2 massive serrated 11-inch long fangs, perfect for tearing and shredding their prey. But their upper body strength was sublime and used to wrestle their meal to the ground to optimize their kill. So imagine like super top heavy. Now researchers used to believe that they took down massive beasts like bison, but it is more likely they hunted tapirs and deer. They lived around 10,000 years ago, and one of the reasons they might have gone extinct was the fact that they didn't diversify their eating habits. So when their food sources disappeared, so did they. That is a simplistic explanation, but just one potential reason as to why we don't have to worry about their toothy grin stalking us while we're camping. Number 5, the Sarcosuchus. A super croc that was afraid of nothing and no one. Don't be afraid. Regular crocodiles today are still absolutely massive and can grow past 9 feet, which is already big enough. I don't know why they shrunk, I'm just glad they did. Sarcosuchus were over 3 times the size of the ones we know today, reaching up to about 40 feet long. What did they eat? Humans! Kidding. They lived 113 million years ago, so extremely not likely at all possible. But if they were alive today, yes they would. They weren't picky eaters, let's just say that. The world was their Mandarin buffet table. Some researchers even estimate that they could take on a Spinosaurus and win. Spinosauruses, we'll mention later. Stay tuned. Though they probably stuck to the fast food fish variety in lake and rivers, because honestly, do you want to cook a meal or do you want McDonald's? It's a toss up. I get their mentality though. Sometimes they just want to up the game.
Number 3, the Incas. Their city is currently a wonder of the modern world. Machu Picchu was built over 500 years ago. It was once known as the lost city of the Inca, and it's absolutely beautiful. It was first discovered in 1911 by archaeologist Hiram Bingham when he and a small team were originally heading out to find the ancient city of Vilcabamba, but instead they found this landmark. The The stones used to build the city were even heavier than they already look. We look at Stonehenge in disbelief right now, wondering how humans were able to lift those rocks, but look at this place. These stones each weighed over 50 tons, and with Machu Picchu literally translating to old mountain, those hills certainly don't look easy to climb. I complained about doing 2 trips carrying groceries. My back hurts just looking at this thing. The Inca were impressive builders. The city is designed perfectly. I mean, evidently. After 500 years of earthquakes and horrible weather, it's wild that the city is still in the shape that it's in. Elongated skulls were also found on the site by archaeologists, and many believe that it's aliens thanks to pop culture, but elongated skulls were actually a sign of royalty in the Incas. It's no surprise Machu Picchu is the most visited place in Peru. You just might want to take your trail shoes when you head over there.
On number 2, Norte Chico civilization. The story of the Norte Chico civilization is fascinating, yet also shrouded in mystery. Overall, very little is known about the Norte Chico civilization, but it is believed that this pre-Columbian society is one of the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Researchers know more about this civilization's infrastructure than the way that the people lived. We know that they had huge buildings like pyramids and complex irrigation systems, but what makes this so bizarre is the fact that there's no evidence of any pottery in the civilization, which suggests that they don't know how to use it. How are you gonna build a whole pyramid but struggle to make a pot? I don't get it. There is also evidence that these people worshipped some kind of deity, but again, no one knows what form this deity took. Now here's where the mystery really comes in. No one knows what happened to the Norte Chico civilization. The settlements were abandoned sometime around 1800 BC, but no one really knows why. There's no evidence of any kind of warfare, and there were no natural disasters to cause them to flee their homes. The people just kind of disappeared, and no one has been able to piece together the puzzle, so we may never know.
And coming in at number 1, the Greek civilization. The Antikythera mechanism is the world's oldest analog computer. It would keep track of the cosmos, and to this day we're trying to figure out the exact purpose of it or how it was built. But what we do know is that one of those dials in there was meant to keep track of the Olympics. That's how important this event was. Thanks to the ancient Greeks, now we get to see dudes hucking shot puts at people. It's great. The ancient Greek civilization thrived in Greece around 500 BC to 2700 BC. The rich history of ancient Greeks spans such a long time that we've divided their time into periods, like the Archaic, Hellenistic, and Classical period. Their wine was so good that they had a wine god in the pantheon, god Dionysus. What an OG. It was deemed a hubris for Greeks to get intoxicated, so they would also add water to their wine. That way they could keep the party going all night, of course, but actually it was done so nobody became violent. Only god Dionysus would drink wine straight out. That's pretty hardcore. If inventing the Olympics wasn't badass enough, they also used stones instead of toilet paper, so I'll let you imagine that in your head. We'll leave on that note. That's a nice pretty image to finish on.